If you've ever asked yourself, what will I wish I had done differently when my time finally comes? Or if you've ever laid awake at night, not out of fear, but from a quiet sense that life has slipped by too quickly, this story is for you. Not to frighten you, not to fill your heart with sorrow, but to remind you it's never too late to soften the ending of your story, to make peace with it, to shape it gently, consciously, while time is still on your side. I've been a hospice nurse for 22 years. That's more than 2 decades of sitting at the edge of beds with people who were letting go. I've held the hands of CEOs, mothers of 5, lonely bachelors, brilliant minds, and quiet souls. I've seen what money means at the end and what it doesn't. I've heard final words that were full of poetry and some filled with silence because the words never came. But here's the truth most people don't realize. When the noise of life fades, the emails, the bills, the calendars, the expectations, people almost always say the same kinds of things. They don't talk about promotions. They don't talk about their cars, their followers, their titles. They talk about moments, regrets, soft, slow revelations that arrive only when the clock becomes honest. I want to share 5 of those confessions with you. 5 things I've heard whispered again and again from lips that barely had strength to speak. But first, can I ask you something? What's one thing you don't want to leave this world without doing? It doesn't need to be grand. It doesn't need to be perfect. Just something your soul keeps nudging you to do, but you haven't yet. If something came to mind, even just a whisper of it, write it in the comments. Not to make it real, it already is, but because naming it is sometimes the first way we give it life. Confession number 1. I wish I had stayed curious. Her name was Margaret, 87 years old, a school teacher for 40 years, brilliant, structured, deeply respected. She had a bookshelf that spanned an entire wall, spines worn with love, dust resting softly on volumes long undisturbed. She was thoughtful, measured, always the one with the answer. But as her final days came closer, she told me something that surprised me. I used to love learning, she said. New languages, new ideas, new ways of seeing the world. Then she paused, looked out the window. But somewhere along the way, I decided I already knew enough. She had stopped asking questions, stopped exploring. She said no to travel, no to new conversations, no to people who challenged her beliefs, because staying certain felt safer. I confused being sure with being smart, she said. But now, I think certainty was a wall I built around wonder. Margaret had no bitterness in her voice, only softness. A quiet ache for all the versions of herself she never became, because she stopped being curious about what else she could be. She told me about a watercolor class she always meant to take. About a trip to Morocco she declined 3 times. About a neighbor she never got to know because their opinions didn't align. She didn't regret what she believed. She regretted never exploring what else might be true. Here's what I learned from Margaret. Curiosity doesn't belong to the young. It belongs to the willing. To the ones who still ask why. To the ones who know that the world is vast and the self is never finished. If you're alive, you're still learning. And if you're still learning, you're still growing, still changing, still discovering new pieces of who you are. Don't let fear make your life smaller. Don't let comfort turn into confinement. Stay curious about others, about yourself, about the mysteries still waiting to be seen in this life you're still living. Confession number 2. I wish I had told the truth about who I was. His name was Harold, 79. He had gentle eyes, a slow, deliberate way of speaking, like each word had been waiting decades to be released. He never married. No children. He worked as a mail sorter for 46 years, kept a tidy home, had a bookshelf full of biographies, but not one photograph on the wall. In his final week, he asked if I would sit with him a little longer. And without looking at me, he said, "I loved someone once. His name was Paul. We met in 1962. He gave me a poem once, handwritten. I tore it up." He paused, swallowed hard. Back then you couldn't love like that. Not out loud, not where we lived. He never told a soul. He buried it so deeply that even he forgot it sometimes. And then, as the end came closer, the memory returned. Raw, vivid, aching. "I lived a good life," he said. "But no one ever really knew me. Not the real me." There was no bitterness in his voice, only a kind of grief that comes from never having been seen. Not because others wouldn't accept you, but because you never gave them the chance. Here's what Harold taught me. Truth doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be yours. To live your truth, to speak it, wear it, walk in it, is one of the kindest things you can do for the person you'll become when time runs out. So if there's something in you that's waiting to be said, say it. If there's a part of you you've hidden to keep others comfortable, set it free. You don't need permission to be who you are, only the courage to stop pretending. Confession number 3. I wish I had forgiven more easily. Teresa was 91. She was sharp, mind like a blade, tongue like a whip when she wanted it to be. She loved crossword puzzles, hot tea, and telling stories that made you laugh right when you least expected it. But under all that charm, there was a heaviness. She carried it like a stone in her pocket, always with her, never spoken of directly. One day, as we sat together listening to the rain, she said quietly, "I wasted years being angry at people who forgot what they did to me." She explained, a sister who borrowed money and never repaid it, a husband who left without a word, friends who disappeared after her diagnosis. "I held it all like proof," she said. "Proof that I mattered. Proof that I had been wronged." But what she realized too late was that the weight of that anger lived in her, not in them. "They moved on," she said. "They laughed, loved, lived. And I let their mistake live in me longer than it ever lived in them." She looked at me and asked, "Do you think it's too late to forgive someone even if they're already gone?" I said no, and she smiled. A smile that looked like release, like breath after years of holding it in. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean pretending the wound didn't happen. It means you finally stop bleeding from it. It means you no longer carry their mistake like a badge or a weapon. You lay it down, not for their sake, but for yours. If there's someone you've been holding in your chest, through silence, through resentment, through the memory of pain, you don't have to call them. You don't have to fix what broke. But maybe today you whisper, I release this. I forgive this. I let this pass through me. And then, let it go. Confession 4. I wish I had enjoyed my body more. Her name was Lucille, 84. She once danced barefoot in the grass with her arms open wide to the sky. There were photographs of her, 22 years old, long legs and wild hair, spinning in a sundress beside a riverbank. She laughed when she showed them to me, but it was a bittersweet laugh, the kind that tastes of memory and missed moments. When I was young, she said, I hated my thighs. I thought my smile was crooked. I covered my arms because they were too soft. She paused, looked down at her hands, wrinkled, trembling, delicate. They were beautiful once, she whispered. But I never told them that. I was so busy picking myself apart, I forgot to be grateful for the skin that carried me. Lucille had 3 children, 6 grandchildren. She once hiked through the Rockies, once swam in the ocean at midnight. But for most of her life, she saw her body as a project, not a partner. I should have worn the dress, she said. I should have swum without shame. I should have danced more, loved more, laughed with my whole belly. The body you live in is not perfect. It never needed to be. It is not here to be flawless. It is here to carry you through love, through experience, through time. Tell it thank you. Feed it something nourishing. Soften the way you speak to it. Let it rest. Let it play. You don't have to wait for your body to change before you let yourself enjoy being alive in it. The joy you've been saving for someday belongs to you now. Confession 5. I wish I had let people help me. Joseph was 88. He had hands like tools, rough, scarred, always ready to fix something. A military man. A quiet man. He built a home from the ground up, supported 3 kids through college, buried his wife with the same stoic strength he carried his whole life. He never cried, never asked for help. Even when he fell down the stairs once, he said, "It's nothing," as blood ran down his arm. In his final week, he was in pain, but the first time he allowed a nurse to hold his hand, he wept. Not from pain, from release. I didn't need to be the strong one, he said. I just didn't know how to let anyone else in. He thought asking for help made him weak, that admitting fear meant he'd failed. But what he realized in those last days was that strength is not the absence of vulnerability. Strength is the ability to be vulnerable. To say, I'm scared. I'm lonely. I need you. Joseph didn't regret what he built. He regretted how long he stood on the outside of his own heart because he believed the door had to stay shut. You don't have to carry it all. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to wait until it's too late to be held. Let someone in. Let someone love the parts of you you keep hidden. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you whole. I wonder, did one of these confessions whisper something to you? a line, a feeling, a memory you haven't visited in years? If so, you can share it in the comments. Or maybe share your own truth, the one you've never said aloud, the one that's been sitting quietly in your chest. This space holds all of it, without shame, without judgment, because you're not alone in what you carry. I've heard these truths spoken in the quietest rooms, where monitors beep like clock hands, and breath becomes the only thing that still separates presence from memory. I've heard them whispered by voices too tired to shout, by hands reaching for something just beyond the edge, a last chance, a last word, a last hope that maybe, somehow, it's not too late. And here's what I've come to believe after 2 decades of listening. Most people don't fear death itself. They fear unlived life. Not the final breath, but the moments they passed up because they thought they had more time, because they were afraid, because they were too busy being who others expected them to be. They don't regret failing. They regret never daring. They don't regret getting older. They regret growing quieter, smaller, less true. And the beautiful, heartbreaking truth is, many of those regrets are still being written in the lives of people who are still here, still breathing, still waiting to begin. But that's the hope. That's the grace. That's the invitation. You're still here, which means your story is still soft in your hands, still being shaped, still waiting for you to choose how it ends. So tell the truth. Ask the question. Take the trip. Forgive the memory. Love your own skin. Let someone in. It doesn't take a grand change, just a quiet return to the life you've been postponing. Because in the end, when everything else fades, what remains is how fully you showed up. For others, yes, but more than anything, for yourself. If this story touched something in you, if it made you pause, if it reminded you of a truth you've been carrying for years, subscribe and come sit with us again tomorrow night. Because every evening we return here, to this quiet corner of the internet, to tell stories that remind you you're not too late, you're not alone, and you're not invisible. Confession 6. I wish I had sent the letter. Her name was Nadine, 83. Soft voice. A collection of scarves that smelled faintly of lavender. She used to write letters, the old-fashioned kind. Paper, ink, folded corners and trembling cursive. But there was one she never sent. It was to her sister. They hadn't spoken in 27 years. Something about a man, a wedding invitation that was never returned. Pride had built a wall, stone by stone, until neither of them remembered what started it. But Nadine remembered the letter. She wrote it one winter evening, after a dream. She never showed it to anyone, folded it, tucked it inside a book of poetry she kept by her bed. When I asked her why she never mailed it, she smiled, but her eyes clouded. I was waiting for her to go first, she said. I thought, if she reached out, then I'd know it mattered. She waited. And so did her sister. Now they were both old, both tired. And time, as it always does, had thinned the road between them until it disappeared. The day Nadine passed, her niece found the letter. Unsent, unopened, unfinished at the bottom. We read it aloud together, a love letter disguised as apology. A bridge never crossed. A truth held too long. And I thought to myself, how many of us are holding words that were meant to be given away? Letters we never write, calls we never make, truths we lock away, thinking we'll do it later. But later isn't promised, and the words don't get lighter with time. They just settle deeper until we're too tired to speak them. So write the letter, even if you don't send it. Say the thing, even if your voice shakes. Let your truth move, not for a response, but for release, because there's nothing lonelier than a love that never got to leave your hands. Confession number 7. I wish I had spoken up. His name was David. He was 76 when the diagnosis came. A slow-growing cancer, but with edges sharp enough to cut through time. He wasn't afraid of dying. He told me that plainly. I've lived a long life, but I didn't always live it out loud. David had a calmness to him, not the peaceful kind, but the kind built from decades of biting his tongue. He told me stories about meetings at work where he had better ideas but never raised his hand, about friendships that faded because he never said, "You hurt me," about sitting at family dinners, swallowing feelings to keep the peace. He thought silence was maturity, that keeping things in was what strong men did. But strength, he realized, isn't silence. It's voice. I had so many chances to say something, he said. To say I was proud, to say I disagreed, to say I loved them. But each time, he thought, I'll wait for the right moment. And now, the moment was gone. Here's what David taught me. You don't have to yell to speak the truth. You don't have to be right to be real. And the people around you, they need your honesty more than they need your quiet. Speak up, not to dominate, but to be heard, to be known, to be present in your own life. Say what hurts. Say what heals. Say what matters while it still can. Because at the end, the words you didn't say echo louder than the ones you did. Not every moment in hospice is heavy. Some are soft, sacred even. There was a woman named Elise, 82, witty, wore perfume every day, even when her hands shook too much to open the bottle. She had one photo by her bedside, a black and white image of her and her brother sitting on the hood of a car, barefoot and laughing. She talked about him often. He was my first friend, she said. They hadn't spoken in 40 years. Something about a fight that turned into silence. One afternoon, the nurse's aide found her quiet. Eyes open, but distant. I sat beside her. She reached for my hand, didn't say much. But when I asked if there was anything she wished for, anything at all, she said, "I wish I hadn't wasted so much time being right." She closed her eyes. And after a moment, she added, "Peace feels better than pride." It stayed with me. That line. Because pride always feels like power in the moment, but it ages into isolation. And sometimes, when the clock begins to slow, people finally feel what they've been running from. The cost of silence, the weight of winning at the expense of closeness. But that day with Elise, something shifted. Her breathing slowed, her face softened. And though her brother never came, she whispered his name one last time. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was release. And sometimes that's enough. Peace doesn't always mean everything's fixed. Sometimes it means you finally stop fighting yourself. You finally allow the moment to just be. No resolution, no applause, just breath and stillness. And in that stillness, a kind of forgiveness that no one else has to give you. Only you. You've heard the stories now, the whispered truths, the unsent letters, the moments that passed too quickly because someone thought there'd be more time. But the most important part? You're not at the end, not yet. You're still breathing, still listening, still holding the pen to write what comes next. You may carry regret, we all do, but you also carry choice, and as long as there's breath in your lungs, there is room to soften, to rewrite, to begin again. You can forgive without an apology. You can speak even if your voice shakes. You can live more honestly, more kindly, more presently than you did yesterday. Don't wait for someday. Don't wait for the hospital room. Don't wait for the clock to remind you that you were always allowed to live as you truly are. The regrets of the dying aren't warnings. They're invitations. They're flashlights in the dark. They're gentle nudges that say, you still have time. And in that time, you can love louder, laugh sooner, soften quicker, return faster. You can become the person your younger self hoped you'd be, and the person your future self will thank you for becoming. So if this story held something sacred for you, subscribe and return here tomorrow night. We'll be waiting. With stories, with memory, with reminders that you are not too late. You are not alone, and you are not finished.